Doctors, nurses, and EMTs of Reddit. What is your best, how the frick are you not dead, moment? Factory incidents can be gruesome and horrifying, or complete what the frick moments. About 20 years ago, there was a guy who stepped into a multi-spindle machine, without locking it out, to adjust a part. He brushed up against one of the drill heads, and it grabbed a hold of his sleeve. It was winter, so, ultimately, fortunately for him, he was wearing a thick flannel shirt, a long sleeve thermal shirt, and a t-shirt under that. The machine grabbed all of those, tore them off him all at once, and the force of it threw him out of the machine, bare from the waist up, into the aisle. He pulled down near every muscle in his upper half, and dislocated one shoulder. That was it. I had to do the investigation, and when I got there the machine was still on with all the remnants of the clothing still spinning on the spindles, instead of the shredded human that should have been there. You could repeat those exact same circumstances 10,000 times, and the only thing you'd have is 10,000 fatalities. I still don't know how it turned out the way it did. Triple GSW rolled in one night. First guy was shot in the butt, second guy shot in the arm, third got shot dead center of his chest. I sent the but guy to my least experienced team. The arm guy had some difficulty breathing, so you figured bullet traveled to his lung, so I sent him to my more experienced team. Then I saw the third guy with a big red circle of blood in the middle of his chest and knew that he was gonna be mine. Chest x-ray was negative. No hemo or pneumo, but also no bullet. Rushed him to CT. Nothing. Shipped him to the local trauma center. A friend who works there said they let him sober up and then sent him home. Where the heck did the bullet go? No freaking clue. My theory is that the shot didn't come from straight on and bounced off his sternum and into the car. I had a young guy, mid-20s, involved in a motor vehicle accident. He was alert and conscious despite the high impact injury. CT scan of his brain showed a massive subdural hemorrhage, which if it was in any other person, would have caused a midline shift. The brain matter gets pushed to the other side, i.e. left to right or vice versa. Luckily for him, he had a skull fracture at the area of the bleed, which acted as a burr hole, a medical procedure that we perform to prevent such midline shift from happening, thus saving his life, or his brain, for that matter. Luckily for him, he had a skull fracture. That's probably a very uncommon statement. Yeah, you could say that again. First time that both the neurosurgeon on call and I were relieved. Guy was working at a factory. Somehow there was an accident and a 2-inch wide 3-foot long board got shot through his head, entered through tip of his nose, and exited just below his skull on the right side. Face was a mess. Came in from another hospital intubated to see if our neurosurgeon could remove the board. We all assumed he was likely neurologically devastated permanently. We cut down the board and took him to CT to see what we were dealing with. As we were waiting for CT to result, we realized Guy's sedation had worn off and he was awake and could follow commands. You couldn't tell he was awake because his face was so swollen and macerated. We quickly reseated him. Turns out board missed nearly everything important. Messed up his internal carotid and lateral mass of C1 vertebrae, but missed his spinal cord by about 2 millimeters. He walked out of the hospital 5 days later after several big surgeries to fix his face and IJ. Neurosurgeon said he'd have a crooked neck forever but otherwise would be fine. Holy frick, that's insane. A woman stuck in her bathtub for 3 days standing water, skin sloughing, totally dehydrated. She looked dead. Worst part, in an effort to unclog the tub, she had been pouring Drano into the water she was sitting in. She was also huge, so getting her out of there was a freaking mess. Once we finally did, she told the medic she was fine and didn't want to go to the hospital. We had to convince her. Unreal. Oh geez. Oh sweet geez. This was bad before the Drano. I know you probably aren't privy to the information, but did she survive? She did. She also moved to a different location to be closer to a caregiver afterwards. Blessing in disguise, I guess. I'm not any of the things mentioned above, but when I was deployed to Afghanistan, a lot of the ANA soldiers would end up getting hurt in combat disproportionately to everyone else. Once I saw this guy come back from the front, who had been shot from armpit to armpit, shot in the head, and stepped on a small IED that blew his leg off as well as one of his hands. He had lacerations all over and was bleeding quite bad. The ANA medics and doctors didn't even bother to put a tourniquet on his leg. They just sent him on over to us with basically no first aid done. All of this while being transferred from heli to heli and an hour plus passing by. Somehow he made it to us alive and sort of coherent enough to look around. Besides the missing leg and his arms being fricked up, he lived and was okay. Holy frick. How in all fricks did he not bleed out? I think the blast seared it shut. I'm not entirely sure as I wasn't involved in his treatment. Sorry for the long read. I'm an EMT in a really diverse area. We get toned out for a GSW with no updates. My squad runs to ambulances on all GSWs. I was on the backup truck. We get on scene and see a large crowd of people all screaming and crying. The cops point us to this kid who is holding his hand in his face. He has no obvious injuries until he look up at us. Blood just started to pool out of his head. This kid was shot in the face but was still able to talk to us. He was losing an unhealthy amount of blood, so we very quickly got him in the truck and called for a bird helicopter. As we are loading him in the back, he asked us, "Why am I alive?" Those words stick with me. No one had an answer for him. We quickly start bandaging the wound. It's a small hole right above his eye. We can't find an exit wound and suspect the bullet is still inside of his head. He is bleeding so much that any piece of gauze is immediately soaked. We get a trauma dressing on the wound and it's barely working. Medics arrive and start with their fourths and fluids. The helicopter finally arrived and we were able to ship him to a good hospital. We later find out that the kid was shooting a rap video of his friend on his phone when the gun went off. The bullet traveled through the phone, struck him above the eye, and started to bounce around in his head. The bullet exited below the kid's eye. We didn't see that hole from the amount of blood. When we packed the trauma dressing, it applied pressure to both wounds. The kid is expecting to make a full recovery, but will most likely never see out of that eye again. I think about that kid a lot. I hope he is doing better now. I work in a neurotrauma ICU. I had a failed suicide attempt come in where a guy tried to shoot himself through the top of the mouth. For whatever reason, he failed and the round ended up blowing his entire face off. The bullet and his teeth fragmented and were peppered all over the inside of his brain. Upon arrival, he was following commands and kept motioning with his fingers in the shape of a gun against his head. His family asked him if he's saying he wanted to shoot himself again, to which he shook his head yes. From this, the family decided that they wanted to withdraw all life-preserving measures and just let him go. It took almost a week before his brain edema became severe enough for him to herniate and die. I've seen the same blow of his face and frontal lobe, though the guy survived and went through massive reconstruction surgery. When he came in, we treated him as an organ donor, since even all the doctors thought he would not survive. He is blind and emotionally quite unstable, for obvious reasons, but walks around nowadays. I saw a dude that and kill himself with a shotgun by pulling the trigger with his toe. His toe pulled the barrel forward just enough to tear through his face without damaging his brain, and the recoil effectively ripped his big toe off. It was hanging on by a thread. Not a fun scene. Worked as a phleb tech in a hospital for a while. Craziest thing I ever saw was this guy that came in having overdosed on drugs. What drugs, you ask? Literally all of them. Alcohol, cocaine, MDMA, opioids, benzodiazepines, K2, and a myriad of other things. I went to draw his blood for some tests, and he asked me if I could get him more drugs from the nurse. I told him he would need to talk to the nurse about that. I ended up having to draw blood from the palm of his hand because his veins were so shot. What a fun night. I had a friend who used to be on some intense drugs. At one point he had to have blood drawn, and he took the needle from the nurse and put it in himself after they missed the vein twice. I had an MS patient do that. 20-year meth addict. Dude couldn't walk to save his life. I try 3 times and nothing close to getting blood. That dude proceeds to stand up, bend over like a pilots instructor, legs straight and bent at waist, then proceeds to, with a shaky as heck hand, insert it behind his shin at a nearly 90-degree angle. Then smiles and says, "I been doing this a while." I'll tell him you did it. The nurses will be impressed. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like and subscribing for more videos like this. Don't forget to leave your stories in the comments below.